Dontaesboxingnation, Dontaescookingnation. We are out here. Where are we at?
We're out here in Bangkok.
There you go. She's from Ireland. Matter of fact, introduce yourself to the world.
My name's Hannah and I'm from Ireland and I'm the biggest fan of Stevenson.
You hear that?
Yeah.
The biggest fan?
And I'm from Ireland, sorry.
No, I can edit it, don't worry about it. All the way in Bangkok, Thailand, y'all.
No,
I'm gonna get
in
it right.
Ireland as well.
In Ireland, you hear that? DBN is international,
My
guys.
churros are ready now.
Dontaesboxingnation, what's going on, guys? So some bad news in the sport of boxing, at least for real boxing fans that want to see the best fights. It turns out Shakur Stevenson's suspicions were actually correct. Bob Arum has just revealed that he wants to make Oscar Valdez versus Navarrete next, and Shakur Stevenson has to fight the loser, or at least Bob Arum, he wants Shakur Stevenson to fight the loser, Valdez-Berchelt. MBF is in full effect. This is exactly what Bob Arum did to Tim Bradley when he was promoting Tim Bradley. At the time, Brandon Rios was undefeated. And of course, they were promoting him as the next big star, right? Tim Bradley wanted to fight him. Brandon Rios had just beat Mike Alvarado. And Bob Arum, he wanted to make Tim Bradley versus Mike Alvarado. Tim Bradley, he came out and he said, I want to fight the winner. Why would I want to fight the guy that just lost to Brandon Rios when I could fight Brandon Rios himself? Remember, Bob Arum, he knows about the MBF rule. And Bob, he's been around boxing long enough to know styles make fights, and there was no way Brandon Rios was going to beat Tim Bradley unless he landed a lucky punch. Everyone has a puncher's chance. But he knew it was highly unlikely that Brandon Rios would beat Tim Bradley. Just like he knows that Oscar Valdez has no chance of beating a Shakur Stevenson. So how come Bob Arum didn't push for the Shakur Stevenson versus Berchelt fight when Berchelt was undefeated? Why do you give the undefeated Berchelt and the undefeated Navarrete to Oscar Valdez and not to Shakur Stevenson? But Shakur can have them after Oscar Valdez beats them or whoever wins? And the fact that Bob Arum, he wants to match Oscar Valdez up against the other undefeated fighter, Navarrete, who's a champion at a smaller weight class, and he wants to match Shakur up against the loser, that means he's trying to promote Oscar as the star, not Shakur Stevenson. This is what Bob Arum said. He said, I want Valdez to fight Emmanuel Navarrete and to match Shakur against maybe Berchelt. We'd see how Shakur does with Berchelt, then we can match the winners. You see how he said that right there, guys? It sounds like he's saying that Shakur has to audition to get a fight with Oscar Valdez. He continues by saying, I think that's the way to go, and that's what we will suggest to them. I hope to have Shakur back in the ring in March or April. Same thing with Valdez and Navarrete. Then Bob, he jumps on code and he starts pulling the boring card, talking about Shakur Stevenson. He says it's one thing to be a talent and another thing to take the talent and become a crowd-pleasing fighter. Shakur now understands this. Shakur, unlike his last performance, didn't come out, win a few rounds, then coast to victory. He came out to beat his opponent decisively. I just want to see him become a superstar, end quote. Now, for the record, Bob Arum, he never said this about Lomachenko after his performance against Teofimo Lopez, when he didn't even engage for 6 rounds. And even in the second half of that fight, he didn't engage as much as Shakur did against the African fighter. I forgot his name, but that's the fight that they're talking about when they say it was boring. That's why it blows my mind that they try to call that a boring performance, because I went back and I watched both fights. The Loma versus Lopez fight and that fight with Shakur Stevenson. Do you guys know, if you watch both of those fights, Loma makes Shakur Stevenson look like Mike Tyson in that fight? Because Lomachenko, once again, he was backing up and he wasn't even punching. Shakur Stevenson, he was the one that was initiating everything. He was the first to attack. He stood his ground against the hardest puncher he had ever faced in his career. And he was the one getting off first all the time. And he was letting his hands go 10 times more than Loma was. So the double standards are through the roof, right? And now it makes even more sense why ESPN, they cut off Shakur Stevenson's post-fight interview after he beat Jamel Herring. I mean, we already knew why it was done, but it just makes more sense now. What I was trying to figure out is, was this just ESPN's decision or was it Bob Arum's decision? And the way Bob Arum is talking right now, and it sounds like he had a lot to do with cutting off Shakur Stevenson's interview because he knew that Shakur Stevenson was going to call out Oscar Valdez, which he did. And we know that the interview wasn't cut short because, they had time restraints and there was another event coming on, because the fight was on ESPN Plus and it didn't even go the whole 12 rounds, which means they had extra time to do a post-fight interview. But going back to Bob Arum implying that Shakur Stevenson wasn't crowd-pleasing before and trying to justify in a certain way why he doesn't feel Shakur qualifies to fight Oscar Valdez, well, it turns out the whole boring excuse, it does not add up statistically. Did you guys know Oscar Valdez, he did his biggest numbers on ESPN when he fought against Miguel Berchelt. The fight peaked at 960,000 views. But Shakur Stevenson, he did 1.2 million, over 1.2 million. Even the average numbers that Shakur Stevenson did were higher than Oscar Valdez's peak numbers. And since Bob, he wants to match Oscar up against Navarrete, let's look at Navarrete's numbers when he fought against Lopez. He did 327,000 views. Now, they only show the average for his numbers because these were the actual numbers that was tuning in to his fight or his portion of the card. So Bob said, being a talent doesn't always translate to becoming a crowd-pleasing fighter. Well, if we look at the stats, we look at the actual numbers, we could easily say having the complexion for the protection also doesn't automatically translate into becoming a crowd-pleasing fighter. And crowd-pleasing fighter just basically means a star, an attraction, a fighter that more people tune in to watch. And that person is Shakur Stevenson, over both Navarrete and Oscar Valdez. Once again, this is how you know when people use these words boring, it is a code word for what they really want to call these fighters on a coincidental list. Now, guys, keep in mind, the whole boring thing, it all started with Mark Kriegel, who works with ESPN. Once again, nobody from ESPN said that Lomachenko was boring. Mark Kriegel, he said, if he doesn't want to start getting called boring, then he can't perform this way. He never said this about Lomachenko because Mark understood this man got the complexion for the protection. So ain't nobody gonna call him boring, including myself. And this is the reason why I really didn't like when Shakur Stevenson, he said thank you to Tim Bradley, because first of all, if he's gonna say thank you to anyone, say it to Mark Kriegel. Tim Bradley, he was just following the leader. Tim was actually praising Shakur the whole night, and soon as Mark Kriegel said that, Tim went on a tirade for the rest of the night, calling this man Shakur Stevenson boring. If this man Mark Kriegel would have said, this is a great performance by Shakur Stevenson, Tim Bradley would have never even called him boring. So Tim and Andre Ward's situation is a little bit different. They say things that they're allowed to say. When they have the permission to say it, that's when they'll say it. The only time they will voluntarily say something is if it is against a black fighter, because they know they're not going to get criticized. They ain't going to have no problem with ESPN if they're saying something about a black fighter. They'll go out of their way when it comes to that. But when it comes to saying something about the others, they're like, okay, let me wait to see if Joe Tessitore or Mark Kriegel is going to say something about this first. That's what they're doing. They're waiting to see if the leaders will say it first. And then once they get the permission, the green light, that's when they be like, okay, we could go ahead and now we could call Loma boring because Joe said it, because Mark Kriegel said it. So now we can start criticizing Lomachenko, right? But like I said, we already know ESPN would never call Lomachenko boring. I mean, literally, that's the definition of being boring. A guy moving around the ring and not throwing any punches, right? I mean, it's one thing to move around the ring and throw punches, But to move and not even punch, there's no better example of what boring would be considered in the sport of boxing. So this is the reason why Shakur should never sit over here and apologize or say thank you for calling me boring. Instead, you should have exposed him and said, how come you never called Lomachenko boring? You know, going back to Bob Arum saying that talent doesn't always translate into an attraction, this is the same way Bob Arum felt about Floyd Mayweather when he was promoting him. HBO nor Bob Arum felt that Floyd Mayweather could ever become a star. They talked about him just the same way Bob is talking about Shakur Stevenson and old media is talking about Shakur right now. These are all code words. We've seen what Floyd Mayweather did. Floyd Mayweather became the biggest star ever in the sport of boxing and the highest paid athlete in all sports across the globe. Now keep in mind, Bob Arum is also the same man that said that Rigo put on a horrible, boring performance after he had just beat Nonito Donaire. That was one of the best fights of the year. Donaire was 10 to 15 pounds bigger than Rigo. He looked way bigger than Rigo. And it was Rigo that was bringing the fight to Nonito Donaire. At the time, Donaire was considered pound for pound top 3, one of the best fighters in the world by many organizations. That fight had all kind of drama. Rigo got knocked down in that fight. Rigo, he broke Nonito Donaire's eye socket in that fight with the retina detachment. And right after the fight, Bob's standing right next to Rigo as Team Rigo is celebrating the biggest win of their career. And Bob is sitting over here shaking his head, saying, I don't know how I'm going to promote this guy. There was a horrible performance. It was boring. I mean, he is just going off. It really sounds like he felt that the wrong guy won. That's how it sounds. And remember, guys, this was Bob Arum, Rigo's own promoter, saying these things. It wasn't like it was another promoter saying these things about Rigo because Rigo just beat his fighter, right? That would make more sense because that's what the losing team often does. They talk bad about the winners. So with that being said, Shakur Stevenson needs to go rogue just like Teofimo Lopez did. Lopez was the one that wanted the Kambosos fight. Bob didn't want that fight. Lopez said, forget this. I'm fighting who I want to fight. He felt that that was a safer fight. He obviously didn't want to fight Devin Haney. In fact, he was offered more money for the Devin Haney fight originally. They offered him $4 million to fight Devin Haney. Bob was offering him $1.5 million to fight Kambosos, and yet Teo still wanted to fight Kambosos, right? But Teo, he told Bob Arum, I'm fighting who I want to fight. And Shakur needs to do the same thing. Shakur needs to be very vocal with the media. He needs to expose how this man continues to protect him when he's supposed to be your promoter. Now Shakur has to fight a guy coming off of a loss. When Oscar Valdez goes against Navarrete for the battle of the undefeateds. This needs to be exposed. And once again, Shakur needs to push for the Oscar Valdez fight, and he needs to make it very clear. Listen, at the end of the day, the reason why we know these are code words when they say boring or not crowd-pleasing, etc., because you have Jaron Ennis, for example. It could be argued he's the most exciting fighter in the sport, and he's getting the same type of reception that Shakur is getting, if not less. If this was really about crowd-pleasing, then Bob, he could have made the Shakur versus Oscar Valdez fight after Shakur was getting all those knockouts on ESPN. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. But for my new subscribers and the people that aren't too familiar with MBF, I'm going to go ahead and play the clip for you. Check it out. So Barbershop Conversations, he did an interview with Cameron Duncan, someone who's very close to Top Rank. And he revealed an extraordinary revelation when it comes to Top Rank. Credit to Barbershop for asking the question. Let me go ahead and play this clip, and I'll be right back.
That's a theory there by the greatest matchmaker, probably, in my opinion, ever. Uh-huh. And I'm not going to mention his name either, but you know what I'm talking about. Uh-huh. And he used to have a thing up on his board, NBF, no black fighters. Uh-huh. And when I was taught to bring up a fighter, you know, and again, it's just, He used to say to me, you can go anywhere in the country, and I'm going to leave it at this. I don't want to go into a long discussion because people are people in God's eyes, and we're all the same. He used to say to me, you can go anywhere into a city in America or anywhere in the world and ask a white guy, and he didn't say any other, he didn't say anything about Hispanic, anything. Ask a white guy to throw a jab, and half of them are going to turn backwards and throw it like a girl and everything. Ask any black man on a street corner in any city in the world, and they will snap out a jab in a heartbeat. And I used to laugh. He said, they're just more physically gifted. And he said, and so they have speed, and better to stay away from them. Nothing personal. So I said, okay. And I've lived by that. And, I don't want to sound like some weird guy, but, you're trying to be safe with your guys. And so, there is a thing about that, but not in a bad way, in a very respectful way, to be careful. So that's all.
All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Elo Deki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to elodeki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram. Fellas, I've got some great news for you. If you've lost your hair or have a receding hairline, the time has come when you can finally get your hairline back through a process called scalp micropigmentation. So here's how it works. It's a hair tattoo that replicates the look of your hair follicles when you have fully shaved it down. So to get this hookup, make sure you follow and contact my man ScalpCarolinas on Instagram. Contact them at 704-499-3471 and make sure you follow them on Instagram.